Hey guys, I'm making this video for you as you're starting the home buying process. I want to make sure I have a good timeline so you can kind of know what to expect as you're going through the home buying process and know some of the key steps along the way so you can see more or less where you're progressing and you know what to expect. So let's begin. Step number one is the pre-approval process. You want to make sure as you're going out to buy a home that you're qualified. You never want to fall in love with a home and just say, oh darn, the finances aren't going to work on that. So the first step is to talk to a loan officer who's going to be able to help you walk through the process. If you're working with a good one, they should be able to go through and say, okay, cool, here's where your credit score is at, here's where your income is at, here's everything that you need to know, here's what your monthly payment is going to look like, here's what your down payment is going to look like, and you can have all the numbers that you need to know and kind of run through a couple of different scenarios to make sure that you're in the best spot. Now, some folks throughout this process, you're going to find out, hey, we don't currently qualify. But again, if you're working with a good one, they should be able to say, hey, here's a couple steps that you need to take so you will be able to qualify in the near future. So again, that's the first process, is the pre-approval. The second step in the process is a search. So once you've been approved, and maybe simultaneously as you're being approved, we're starting to look. You have your criteria of what you're looking for. I have a software that allows me to send homes and really narrow in the criteria to, hey, I'm looking for 5+ bed, 3+ bath, under $400K in Orem and Provo. I want the home to be newer than 1980s. And then you can go in and go super deep or leave it a little more broad, whether, hey, I want to make sure I have at least 1/4 of an acre. And then you can go pretty deep on that. That way it sends you notifications as those homes come up. And then you can stay pretty on top of the market of, okay, cool, here's what it is. Here's how often they're coming up. Here's kind of what I feel like I can negotiate there. And then you can just be really on top of the search process so you know the market very well. Because nothing's worse than going to a house and it being the perfect house, but you haven't been able to feel out the market well enough, so you miss out on the perfect home. And then the rest of your home buying experience, you're like, Anyway, you're just fighting with it because you're trying to find the right setup and you already missed the first one. So as much as and as early as you can start the home search process, you can feel that out a little better. I guess part two of step two, which is the home search process, as we start looking at homes. As those homes are coming to you, you can say, hey, Terry, these are the ones that I want to see. We want to see them tomorrow from 5 to 7 o'clock p.m. And then we go out and we look at these homes, right? And maybe on our first time looking, we find the right one, and then we start the offer process. But more than likely, we're not going to find the perfect one on our first time searching. So we just stay really close on the market. We try to move on those very, very quickly. In this market where we're at right now, we have to move on those very, very quickly. So we stay on top of that home search. And as soon as one pops up, you let us know and we go in and we set up a showing. Step number 3 is the offer and the negotiations. So assume we found the home, we've been pre-approved, and everything looks good on this home, and we start the offer process. As part of this, this video could be 30, 40, 50 minutes, right? And there's a lot of dialogue that takes place as we're at the home or as we're deciding on the home. So I'm not going to go too deep into it, but essentially we find the terms of the home, the purchase price that we're looking at, the earnest money. We'll go in deep on all those different details, and then we'll make sure that we're finding the right offer and the right setup for you. And then we go through and we present that to them. Hopefully, we're not competing against multiple offers, but if we are, odds are they might just select one of those offers. If it's just us and them, they may choose to accept or counter that offer, and we go back and forth until we can find agreeable terms for everyone. If we find agreeable terms for everyone, then we get a deal going. If there aren't any agreeable terms, or one side just can't budge, or one side can't make it work, then unfortunately that stinks. But you don't lose anything, the seller doesn't lose anything, everyone just keeps going, and we get back to the search process. But assuming this goes well, we're going to talk about the next step. Step number 4. We're now under contract, negotiations went well, everything went nice and smooth here. So we're going to go pretty deep into what happens when we're under contract, because this is probably where the most questions take place and the most lag between things. So let's go into the first one. Number 1, when we're under contract, is the earnest money. I will spend a little bit of time on here. The earnest money is essentially a deposit that goes from the buyer, usually to the buyer's brokerage, and it stays there as a neutral third party. Those funds can't be dispersed unless it says so in the contract and it's dispersed accordingly. So throughout this time, we have our due diligence period, we have our finance and appraisal period, and then we close, right? So during that, your earnest money is usually protected for essentially whatever reason that you find that you dislike something about the house during your due diligence period. And then it's protected for any finance reason. If for whatever reason you lost your job, the loan wasn't able to take place, or whatever the situation was, you're able to come back and get your earnest money back for finance and appraisal period throughout your finance and appraisal deadlines. So again, this is a little bit of an overview, but the earnest money is an important part, and that's something that's often disputed. I have a whole other video where I talk specifically about earnest money, but essentially that's the deposit there, and if everything goes smoothly, then that just gets used toward your down payment. Step number 4-2 is the seller's disclosures. The seller's disclosures is essentially a pretty long 6 or 7 page document that asks a bunch of questions to the seller. Is, have you done any remodels? What are some of the issues you know about the home? And they have to go through and they have to sign all of those and send those back to you. On the buyer, that's kind of good to know. We go through and we check all those off, and if everything looks good, then we go ahead and take the next step, which is inspection. Step number 4-3, the inspection and the due diligence process. Throughout this time frame, this is where you can still pull out, I shouldn't say it like this, but you can essentially pull out for whatever reason that you just dislike the home, you found out that it had mold, or whatever the situation is, you can take and you can pull out during this period. I always recommend that folks do an inspection. An inspection, usually depending on the size of the home, can be anywhere between $300 to $600. The inspector will go in there, and his job is to find every little itty bitty tiny little issue with the home. They go through and they check over 100 points on the home and say, hey, here's everything on that. Here are some of the things I would be concerned about. Here are some of the minor things that maybe I'm not too concerned about, but little things that you should go around and fix as you go forward. The main purpose of the inspection isn't, hey, let's make a big laundry list of things to send to the seller. It's to find, hey, are there any big things that we're particularly concerned about or feel like that are deal breakers or we really need to renegotiate? And that's what the due diligence period is used for, and that's what the inspection is used for. So the next step in our under contract process is the finance and appraisal. During the finance and appraisal, assuming everything's gone well on the due diligence side from the get-go, since we've been under contract, you've been working with the lender, and the lender has been saying, okay, cool, here are all the documents I need. You send them all the documents, you sign their disclosures, you get everything going that's on the loan side of things, and moving that forward. And assuming everything goes well, then the lender is going to order an appraisal. An appraiser is going to go out to the property, he's going to check it. On most residential, they use the comparative approach and just say, hey, based on XYZ other properties in the area that have sold, we feel like the property is worth what it is, and it's going to be a sound investment for the bank or the lender, whomever is lending on it, right? But if an appraisal comes in low, then if we made our offer contingent on the appraisal deadline, then we can say, okay, we either want to renegotiate or back out or pay the difference between the difference between what's it being appraised at and then what our contract price is. So that's essentially time to renegotiate and go to town there if the appraisal comes in low. Assume the appraisal comes in high or at value, then you say, cheers, the bank's comfortable with this house, we're comfortable with this house, and we take and move on to the next step. So that's the appraisal part of the finance and appraisal. The finance side is the lender is going to go in pretty deep on all your finances and make sure that you're going to be a good borrower for them. And assuming everything goes well there, then cheers, we're ready for closing. Last step, we're at closing. We're at the closing table. We've passed our due diligence. We passed our finance and appraisal. We've gone through a little bit of this roller coaster, and hopefully it hasn't been too bad, and hopefully it's been a little bit enjoyable. But now we're at the closing table. This is where, you warm up your wrists, get everything going, because you've got tons of papers to sign. During this, you sign loan documents, you sign all the deeds, so the property goes into your name, and then now you'll be a homeowner, or you'll be owning this other home if you've already been a homeowner. And I guess I don't tend to get too many questions during the closing. I'm usually there, the lender is usually there. Obviously, a title rep is there, and they go through and they explain all the documents. A lot of them are loan docs that you've already seen. And then they say, these are the terms. Make sure that you agree with them and you sign and you move forward. and everyone's happy and the home is yours. It's not at signing when the home becomes yours. It's actually at recording, right? So after we sign, those documents go to the loan, to whoever is doing the loan on it, or if it's cash, it's a little easier, but let's assume they're doing a loan on it. Then they say, okay, cool. We clear it, we're good to go. Funds are sent, then funds are wired, and there's a little bit of wiring going on from one place to another. And then once all the money's been sent, then the title company takes and records it at the county. And once it's been recorded at the county, then the home is now yours. We have passed go, collect $200, everything is good to go, and the home is now yours. So you've passed this crazy process of what it is to be a home purchaser. If you guys have any questions on any of this, feel free to reach out to me. But this will hopefully give you a decent overall view of what it means to buy a home. And as you're going through, you're like, oh yeah, that was one of the things that we saw in the video. So again, always feel free to ask any questions, but I decided to make this video just so you get a pretty good timeline and a pretty good overview. And one thing I didn't mention while I was talking about it, but just from the time that you have an offer accepted to closing, the normal time frame is about 30 days for their due diligence. It's usually 10 or so days, and finance and appraisal, usually 3 to 4 weeks is kind of what you're looking at there. So that's a little bit of the timeline that's throughout the process. So hope this video was beneficial for you and that you're ready to buy a home and get going on that next step. Thanks so much, and hope you have a good one.